I do have to mention that I have been failing in my one job at this event, and that is that nobody has come up to me and tried to buy a Worcester Tea Party t-shirt. This is a deep discounted Christmas present, okay? You talk about your Black Friday deals. We are having a deep discount right here for $12 for this t-shirt. We have sizes for, regular size people as opposed to big fat guys like me. Absolutely. It's a requirement. $12. $12. Absolutely appropriate for any age. Come on back and see me, the tall guy anytime, and I'll be happy to hook you up.
That's how you get them together.
Give us a mark, have a seat, please. Everybody else, please, come in and sit down.
He's passing out, but I haven't hit him out in my democracy.
So my question is,
I did work on election day. Yeah, no, I have not sent it yet, but I did.
and we've got contacts.
Okay, we need one to two candidates, please sit down.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to the website.
Maybe I should say.
I should have been, but I was not. So that's why I haven't done much with everyone. I'm testing your capabilities. I wasn't over.
Yeah, that was Sunday.
I know. And I got a photo. I had gotten, I filled this out. I have Kyle email.
All right,
Sent you the bill. wrote to me.
Okay, if we can turn down the volume, please, I'll just a little whisper here, we need to get going
What's
there.
wrong is just before.
First of all, thank everybody for coming this evening.
It doesn't matter, I just.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more time if we can go to soft voices, please. Thank you. Okay, the next question. What is your official stand on energy independence? What changes, improvements would you institute to allow a pipeline through Mass? Of course, we know that they kind of both differ there. And what, I guess, since you differ, what would you do in place of it? And what do you think it would take if you don't like it to get you on board? So we'll start with Mark first.
So on energy independence, I guess the more we're independent, the more I see it. And that's a no-brainer. I guess that's the reason why gas prices are down, because we have more domestic oil. We're not relying on foreign sources of oil. It's a great thing for our independence. It's also a great thing for our economy. So obviously, I think anybody, no matter what political persuasion they are, would be for that. And like I said before the break, I am for the gas pipelines. And, anything else to add to that one, John?
Okay. Evan?
Yeah, we need to limit the extent to which we're reliant on other countries who may not have our best interests at heart for our needed energy supplies. And you look at examples out there. Germany's this really interesting example. Now, these guys ended up in a situation when Russia turned off the spigots for the gas because they didn't like some stuff that was going on in Germany, or they did that in Ukraine as well. And the Germans said, you know what, we're not going to let this happen. So they did a lot of investment in solar in particular, but also offshore wind. And at this point, they're getting a huge chunk of their energy from locally produced energy. And they can say to the Russians, when the Russians get up to no good, well, okay, not our problem. Now in America, we've had the good fortune of having all these supplies of natural gas and oil that's been discovered through the hydraulic fracturing, all the new scientific discoveries that have made this possible. But it isn't a long-term solution. It just isn't. And so we have to be making the investment, the spending in making sure we have in place that infrastructure so that we're not vulnerable like that. And that's pretty simple. I think when we see what has happened around the world, where we've been drawn into conflict, where oil is part of the picture, we can't be in that situation. So we have to be doing these things. I think that a lot of technology over the course of the next couple of decades is going to make it so that we're able to rely more on things like electric cars. You see these Teslas driving around. It's a really cool car. The really interesting thing about that is that it's got a battery in it that could actually... No, they don't work. But what you know is, if you had solar panels in your house, you could charge that car, and that thing could be there at night to run your house at night. And you'd have enough electricity for that. With a battery, you could have a portable version of that battery around. I think that'd be a lot better if everybody was self-sufficient, as opposed to us always relying on people from other countries to provide our energy.
Okay, healthcare, the whole healthcare debacle. I even need to say healthcare connector because I don't know that many people that are getting connected. It's a mess. The website, hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent on who knows what, because we still really don't have a federal or a state website that really works well. It was working much better before either of the two parties who recently got involved, but we'll set that aside. How would you guys repair it? What would you do in place of it? And both of you have talked a little bit about immigrants. We're all immigrants. But the illegals that are coming across, when they get all the free stuff, like the free health care, at the price of what health care is, how do you feel about that? Mark?
I've talked about it in the campaign on health care. Definitely open it up across state lines like we did with car insurance. It invites competition. Competition is a good thing. When the state did it with auto insurance, our premiums went down. The same thing would happen insurance. The second thing I advocated for is health insurance in line with car insurance. We all have car insurance, but we don't use our car insurance for the regular purposes of gas and oil and tires and wiper blades and tune-ups. We use it for catastrophic things. And our car is involved with a collision or there's some sort of vandalism, comprehensive care, something like that. I would say let's have health insurance that way. And under the Affordable Care Act, there actually is an option for catastrophic coverage. What does that do? It allows the individual, when I go for either a checkup or a procedure, I don't know what the cost is. And I don't think the provider knows what the cost is, at least the person I'm talking to across the window. They bill the insurance company bills me. I know well after the fact, my statement of benefits, what it cost me. Maybe my premium goes up the following year and so on and so on. Because there's this middleman of the insurer who's involved with every aspect of my health care, that's why healthcare costs keep going up and up and up and up. But with catastrophic care, if I only use that middleman for catastrophic things, I then have the choice to go in and I create the competition because I'll know then and there what that price is. And before I decide to place my dollars with that provider, I'm going to go somewhere else. And maybe I will place it with a provider whose cost is a little bit higher, but because they're offering some other type of service. But this is my choice. And I want to drive it, and that competition will keep costs low. So opening it up across state lines increases competition. Having health insurance in the same lines as auto insurance for catastrophic things, not the regular everyday type of things, would increase competition and drive costs down. And then the last thing, in the campaign, a lot of the candidates, maybe most, maybe all except for one or two, thought that healthcare was a right. I said no, healthcare is not a right. Healthcare was a right. Why does the federal government give us a penalty if we don't exercise that right to buy it from them?
Right.
I gave the example, I've had a couple of employees who didn't want to purchase the health insurance that I provided. For them, their personal choice of happiness did not consist of health insurance. For me, it does, but we can't have a blanket situation like that. If health insurance is a right, then what else is a right? You know, an in-ground pool, a three-car garage, a six-pack, whatever it might be. No, these all fall under. The Declaration of Independence tells us we have this God-given right to pursue happiness. And it's our choice to pursue happiness. And maybe for some of us that involves health insurance, maybe it doesn't. But if the government takes away our God-given right to pursue happiness, then the government imposes happiness. And you will be happy with government-imposed health insurance, and if you're not, you're going to pay a penalty for it. This is where we are in the United States of America. Now, this is not a communist country. This is the United States of America. I was told today, I couldn't believe it, I'm assuming it's true, but in North Korea, citizens cannot have the same first name as the leader. You can't. And they were telling me, I couldn't believe it, that they all have to have the same haircut as the leader. I guess guys like me would be accepted, you know. This is ridiculous. But yet, our government says you will have health insurance provided by us, or you have to pay a penalty for it. That's my take, John.
The fact that Mark and I can have these two very different haircuts tells me that America is the greatest country on earth. See, that's what I'm talking about. Pursuit of happiness. So this is what's important about healthcare. There's actually two things when you say the word healthcare. There's health coverage, health insurance, and then there's the care itself, the actual care. They're two different things. And it gets very confusing because you hear about healthcare reform. And what are they talking about? They're actually talking about health insurance reform. It gets very confusing. Now, this is what's going on, and I suppose the good news for people that like high deductible plans, I happen to also think they're a good idea, is that this is the direction our country is heading in. And people, consumers, are starting to see what things actually cost. And providers know full well what things cost. That's how they make their living. And the real money is coming from the hospitals. So for example, if you've been to an emergency room lately, and gotten an x-ray. A friend of mine got an x-ray, he had injured his shoulder, got an x-ray at a hospital outside of Boston. He got a bill, it was under his deductible, for $570 for an x-ray, which is a little bit like a picture, okay? And this is technology that is well over 100 years old. So this is not some really complicated thing like, whoa, wait a minute, we're bringing in the x-ray machine, sir. Look out, it's an x-ray, costs a lot of money.
The insurance company.
But the insurance company's not sitting there, it's the hospital that's doing that. This is the problem. Now the insurance companies are working closely with the hospital. And by working closely, I mean kind of in bed with the hospital. I had a friend of mine, his parents live in a sort of rural community, and they had a community association that was trying to cull a deer population in the neighborhood. And they sent out notes to the people in the community, said, listen, just be aware there are going to be some men in the woods working with the deer. Right? So the insurance companies are working with the hospitals to help you. That's what's going on. So they tried to figure out, and I'm not saying they do this in a fully conspiratorial way, but they kind of sort of do, figure out how much can the market bear as far as premium increases. And that's how they figure how much they can increase their prices every year. There's no other conceivable way that an x-ray can cost $570. There's no other conceivable way that someone can go to the hospital and find you can get an aspirin for $75 that you can just go buy at a store. This kind of stuff happens all the time because of the profiteering. Now my solution to this is to say the market is totally broken because people are being abused by it. And they're starting to see it a little bit. And let me also point out that healthcare does not work like any other market. I'm talking about providing healthcare. If you had, God forbid, cancer, and someone said to you, you can go to a community hospital in whatever town you live in, or you can go to the Dana-Farber in Boston, and I told you that the Dana-Farber costs $30,000 for your cancer treatment, but it's only $5,000 in your local community, I think most people would say, geez, that Dana-Farber must be pretty darn good. And I got cancer and I want to be cured of it. This is sort of the way that people tend to think about healthcare, especially if the insurance company is paying for the whole thing. If the insurance company told you you're better off at that local hospital instead of going to the Dana-Farber, the insurance company told you, I am from the insurance company here to help you, you don't believe them. So what's wrong is the way that this is set up, which is that they can charge whatever they want. So what I propose is something they've done in other states like Maryland, where you build what's called a fee schedule. And the government requires that everybody live by those same rules. They can make a profit, these hospitals, their businesses. And you give the money to the hospital. You say, look, end of the year, here's your money for the next year. Do whatever you want to do. You want to fill your beds every night? Go for it. You want to figure out ways to do public health and work with people in the community to keep them out of the hospital? You can do that too. You'll make money that way. They should be making their money off of keeping people well rather than waiting for them to show up sick. But our model is based on keeping people sick. So that needs to change. It won't happen until we elect new people.
Okay, the last part of my question. Evan had mentioned we're both like high deductible plans, low premium, high deductible plans. The insurance companies provide these plans, but for example, I have that type of situation at my work, and I pay more than 50% of the lower premium, but I pay 100% of the deductible. But we cannot get quotes from the majority of healthcare providers, insurance companies I should say, because I pay 100% of the deductible. And at first it took me back, and I asked my broker to explain that to me, and what she said is this: the insurance companies know that you're paying more than 50%, in this case 100%. If one of your employees has a decision to make about elective surgery, or some sort of elective care, they will be more willing to go and do it if you're going to foot the bill for it, pay 100% of the out-of-pocket cost. And the insurance companies know that, and they don't like that because that's less money in their pockets. So these insurance companies will not provide us a quote unless I sign a form to say I will not pay more than 50% of my employees' deductible. These are companies that tell you in their advertisements and everything that they're providing for your health care. They're providing for big profit. So it's another take on it. These are good plans, but some insurance companies won't quote on them unless your employer is paying for less than 50% of the deductible.
One of the other things that Mark mentioned, car insurance. We're required to have car insurance. And part of the reason for it is the same reason that I think it's appropriate that we're required to own health insurance, is that it is not true that if you're not covered that the care is going to be free somehow. We're going to pay for it anyway. What ends up happening is that either the hospitals go and spread that cost of the people that didn't have coverage onto everybody else, or they're going to go to the government to get reimbursed, and they do, which means that more of our tax money goes to this. I don't like people being free riders, and a lot of people do. And so, you know, it isn't about, look, I own health insurance, obviously. It is not part of my pursuit of happiness. It's okay. I mean, I don't feel happy when I write that insurance check. I feel covered. I certainly feel responsible, you know, that I'm doing that, and not saying, well, someone else will pay my bill for me. But I think we need to have that level of personal responsibility to be covered, and if people aren't going to live up to that responsibility, then they need to be required to do it.
Gentlemen, one of the big things that comes up time and time again about health care, especially in this state, is in regards to tort reform. Mark, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's a big problem. I think other states have tried to address it. I don't know if it's done in this state or not. This is where people can sue for any kind of money with regard to malpractice practices in health insurance and so on, and very, very high payouts to drive the costs of health care or health insurance. So I'm in favor of it. Exactly how it would play out, John, I haven't gone through that.
Yeah, we need that tort reform. Now, historically, Democrats don't like tort reform because there's a lot of trial lawyers that support the Democratic Party, and so Democrats won't even talk about it. So in a state like Massachusetts, if you're a OBGYN who deliver babies, that's a really high-risk profession to be in. Your medical malpractice coverage is really, really high. And you can't afford to stay in business unless you're either going to deliver tons of babies, which makes you a little bit higher risk because you're going to deliver tons of babies every day, or you can afford to affiliate with a big hospital that can cover your costs. It's part of the reason why we see so many doctors that are really experienced doctors leaving the profession, because they can't afford to be in it anymore. And younger people saying, why would I go into that line of work? Again, people are making money off of that, but it's bad. It's really bad, and people aren't willing to confront it. So how do you do it? You could cap medical malpractice awards. You could have higher standards. I mean, certainly if someone is grievously injured by a doctor, they ought to pay that. But right now what you end up happening is that there are things that take place that you don't like the outcome of, and it becomes very quickly malpractice, or at least alleged to be, and now we're in court, and now there's litigation over these things, and it's cheaper just to pay it and make it go away. There's a lot of lawyers making money off of this. There's insurance companies that are trying their best to do what they do, but it affects the quality of care that people get because the best doctors don't necessarily stay as doctors.
Okay, let's move on to the DCF. As we all know, and I think everybody in this room would probably feel, at least in this state, that the DCF is a complete mess. The director has resigned following the Jeremiah Oliver and the Justina Pelletier debacles, yet still works for the state and makes more money. How do you guys feel about what's been going on within DCF? How does one child, and I'm going to use Justina as an example, get 3 or 4 people a day checking on her, and that poor little boy from Fitchburg hadn't anybody look in on him in over 6 months? Mark?
So during the campaign, I said that I think the solution to this problem and other problems in the state similar to this, part of the solution would be to have the workers at DCF be mandated reporters of any kind of fraud, abuse, or scandal. And in that way, because Olga Roche, the head of DCF, was complaining that this was an isolated incident, we found that it wasn't, and that it was deep down within the organization, it was hard to find. Well, if we make all the employers mandated reporters, as, by the way, my wife works for the Worcester Public Schools, she and other public servants like the police and the fire are mandated reporters of possible sexual abuse of minors. They're mandated reporters. I'm saying let's do the same thing, not with regard to sexual abuse, but also fraud, abuse, scandal in an agency like this. So, if an agency cannot perform what it's supposed to do, let's say that they're understaffed or there's procedural problems, they can't do what they're supposed to do, make them mandated reporters. Let them go out to the proper authorities or to the press so that the issue gets elevated because it doesn't fester. that's part of the solution. I think it's an improvement. But the problem, I think, with the government, this is a government agency. It'll always be a Band-Aid solution, and it's not going to be anywhere near what we want it to be. I think the failure, think about Jeremiah Oliver, Diane Williamson, pretty liberal columnist here with the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. She wrote a wonderful article about that whole situation. The father of Jeremiah Oliver, talk about the people in DCF hadn't seen that boy in 6 months. Father hadn't seen that boy in over 2 years. And the reason for it was is that, I don't know if it's his wife, but the woman that he fathered that child with had a restraining order against him. And the father of Jeremiah Oliver also had 6 other children with 3 other women. And he was arrested for dealing or buying cocaine or heroin from an undercover officer. This is a failure of the family and society in general. And once again, as I said earlier, here we are asking the government to solve it, a bureaucracy to solve it. They're not going to solve it. They're not going to solve it. At best, it's going to be a Band-Aid. And here's the other thing. We have the government, in the case perhaps of Jeremiah Oliver and others, where we're sponsoring, with taxpayer dollars sponsoring the breakup and causing unstable family situations and children suffer. That's right. For example, if there's a woman, or a couple that are unmarried, unstable, and they have multiple children, we're giving additional money as they get additional children. I'm not uncompassionate. I would say let's fund and give money to people in those situations and say let's draw a line in the sand. But if you want to keep doing this, we don't want to encourage bad behavior, and we don't want children to suffer from this. I think this is a way government can take a positive role and not encouraging these types of situations where children suffer in them. But it's a breakdown of the family, it's a breakdown of our society, and our government, we expect them to provide a solution. I think we're going to be disappointed.
There's a lot of need out there. There's a lot of need out there. There's a lot of people suffering with different kinds of mental illness, trauma, kids that are being raised in homes, whether the parents are together or not, where they're being exposed to things or maybe being traumatized themselves. There's a lot of need. There's a lot of need, and this is one of the things we've got government for. When you think about these cases, like the Oliver case, what to me is most meaningful is not just the tragedy of it, but the complete lack of accountability in the organization that did this. And I'm not talking about the DCF because they report up to the governor. The governor's the one who's responsible at the end of the day. And Harry Truman said the buck stops here. I think what we've seen, not just here in Massachusetts, it's happened at the federal level too. They figure out where the buck should stop, and it's always someone lower down in an organization who gets blamed. They maybe or maybe not get fired. The governor or the leader never is really leveling with anybody about what's going on and why. And the rest of us as voters are left to say, what just happened? And it's very frustrating, and makes you feel anxious, right? When you feel that way, so you're like, why won't you just tell us what the deal is? You know, and you would think that, and it's a strange thing about the culture of how our government works right now in our country, is that this kind of thing happens, and you would think that the governor would be like, listen, I'm the governor, this happened on my watch, this is a horrible tragedy. The head of this organization is accountable. I've met with her, we've had a conversation about it, we've had an internal study. She is going to be removed. I am accountable for making sure that everybody in the public understands what happened in this case. I want to make sure you've got confidence that going forward, this kind of thing not only won't happen again, but other things that could happen again won't. But if they do, I'm going to be just as accountable to you as I was in this one case. That kind of statement never happens in our government. Remember when that Tylenol thing happened back in the early 80s? That company took a huge tragedy, and man, did they handle it well. The CEO was out there on TV. Remember those commercials, just like a blank screen behind him? He was out there and said, this is what happened. This is what we're doing to fix it. We're recalling every single bottle of Tylenol. Throw it away if you've got it at home. We feel horrible about this. This is what we're doing to make sure this kind of thing never happens again. That company could have been put out of business by that tragedy, but they were not. In fact, their brand was made more powerful because of it. Well, we need people to be elected into our government who will handle crises like these just like that. You know, one last thing on this, because I was asked a similar question during one of the forums, and actually, I think it was during the debate on WBZ, where we were getting into the intricacies of some case that actually I didn't even know what it was, and I don't know who Charlie and Martha were talking about, even though I studied this stuff very closely. But I said, here's the problem: these kinds of crises, these kinds of tragedies, are going to happen when one of us is governor. It will happen. We don't know where it'll be. It may not be DCF. Maybe it'll be the Department of Transportation. Maybe the tunnel will collapse or something. Something will happen. And so the question is not, do you know exactly what you're going to say or do under those circumstances? Can you prevent every bad thing from happening? But instead, how will you act when it does happen? Because it will. Will you be straight? Will you be accountable? Will you level with voters? That's what we should be looking for.
I'm going to stick this question in because the party of caring has certainly walked away from the mental ill. Virtually every facility that I can think of has been closed, and if you look around the streets in Worcester, Fitchburg, Boston, Providence, virtually anywhere, people who really need help are out walking the streets, and that's wrong, I think.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
To go back, I mean, Evan and I agree on a lot of things, and I think we agree that, like I said earlier, we can't disagree on the needy, and there's a lot of people that need help. But I do disagree with Evan when he says that that's what government's for, one of the reasons government's for. I say no. I think that's the response of Scrooge. It's the government's business. I pay my taxes, let the government solve it. And so we have Olga Roche at DCF and doesn't solve it, and she's still collecting her paycheck, and nobody's responsible. It's the response of the ghost of Marley. Mankind is my business. Charity, it's my business. The government's taken it away from us, and you know what? We've turned a blind eye, and we said, let the government do with it, and when they don't fail, we blame the government. We've got to take responsibility for ourselves. It's the culture's problem, it's society's problem, it's our individual, local neighborhoods and communities and towns. It's not Beacon Hill's problem, it shouldn't be government's problem, and if we keep it as government's problem, it will never get better. It will never get better. You know, I grew up in the 60s, where a lot of what's going on right now would be scandalous. I mean, you couldn't do the types of things that are going on. And we as a society have allowed it to happen. We've made that bed, and if we don't like it, we gotta remake the bed. We can't blame government for it. And it's not gonna be an easy thing. I mean, the people who run these organizations, they're getting big paychecks and big pensions and big grandiose power. I'm talking about taking that all away from them. There are good charities out there that are gone. Private are gone because government's taken over that role. And I swear, if we got the money back from the government that they're spending on these types of programs, we would have to give 30% of it back to charities to do the job much better than the government's doing. I think this is a great, forget about if you don't want to look at it from a compassion, morality point of view, from a Tea Party standpoint, if you want to look at it, the dollars that are taken from us and misused, bring it back in our pockets. We can refuel the economy that way. It's just misused by government, and there's no incentive to do it right. There's no incentive to do it right. And if you just look at Massachusetts. Massachusetts has been run by liberal Democrats for all my lifetime. It should be a shining example of how liberalism works for us. It should be a shining example. Every Democrat in the country should look to Massachusetts and say, see how great things we provide for you. And Massachusetts is a mess. It's horrible. It's an example of how liberalism and socialism doesn't work and how government fails us. I think part of the Tea Party, it's talking about how our establishment, whether it be in the business or whether it be in politics or in government, political parties, has failed us. And we want to take that back. Ronald Reagan, I think it's on his tombstone that he was proud to give government back to the people. We say all the time, government of, for, and by the people. It's in political parties like the Republicans and Democrats, like Evan on the back for fighting against those parties. I mean, but it involves on us. And if we turn a blind eye like Scrooge did and says it's not our business, it's the government, there's DCF and other organizations, it's their problem, and we can complain about them and complain about the Patrick, we've got to take those things back. How that happens, when it happens, I don't know, but that's the goal. We have to be fighting for that.
Evan?
Well, I just gotta defend Massachusetts. Massachusetts is not horrible.
Communist state of America.
Hold on a minute.
Come on.
I was the one drinking the Guinness. What have you been drinking?
Well, you're using the word Massachusetts, I guess, as the same thing as the government of Massachusetts. I'm talking about Massachusetts. This is the best place. I grew up here. To me, this is the best place in the country to live. I think. Yep. Okay. That's right. All right. I know you guys. I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. I hear you. It's okay. But I'm just trying to say I like Massachusetts. And I think that there's a reason why Massachusetts has done better than other states coming out of this recession. It's because of all the innovation that happens here, all the great companies that have been started here, all the great schools, and in spite of what I say about the hospitals, all the great health care that we have here in Massachusetts. There's a lot of great things about our state that we should be really, really proud of. All right? And there's a lot of things about our state that we should be ashamed of and should say we can do better than that. But I don't think we do ourselves any favor by beating ourselves down like that. I don't think that's right at all. I think there's a lot to be proud of in our state. And I'll defend that. And I will defend that position, clearly. Now, the government's got some issues with it. And look, I went and I tried to found a whole new political party because I think our government's got problems. And you guys have tried to do the same thing. Well, excuse my language, let's not crap on Massachusetts. This is a good place. This is a good place. This is worth fighting for. It's worth it. So, let me say, because the question was about mental health and what's gone on. And again, yes, there are people walking around in our streets who need help. And let me tell you about something about the difference between, say, the 1960s or the 1970s and today. In the 1960s and the 70s, we did not have the capacity to diagnose people with the broad different kinds of amounts of mental illness that exist, that people suffer with. And it's not just the guy walking around in the street. I hear people in politics all the time say we need to reduce the stigma of mental illness. And that sounds nice, except you're using the word stigma in the same sense as mental illness. We should recognize the reality that there are more people around in our lives that are taking advantage and using, and bravely using mental health services than we care to admit, and embrace that reality and say it's a good and healthy thing that people are taking care of themselves. And understand that a lot of the problems we face are from people not getting treated for illnesses that they face because they're ashamed, because they're afraid, because they're too busy medicating themselves with drugs or alcohol or doing other unhealthy things that are causing problems for themselves and their families. So when we pretend that we can go back to a time in which we didn't know mental illness existed or we pretended it wasn't important, we are not being the kind of smart people that this state is full of. There's a lot of good things about Massachusetts, and one of them is our ability to call things what they are. We should be proud of that, and we should work to make things live up to the standards that we've set for ourselves.
We have one more question and related to all this, and how do you both feel about returning the abuse cases back to criminal court adverse to an agency that can't show up at a little boy's door for 6 months, but yet can show up with a high-profile case with half a dozen people several times a day? I think that there's a big difference between the two cases that we talked about tonight, that obviously I don't think abuse is going to stop until we deal with it and we put it back and at least make some of it criminal. Because it's going to lead there eventually. Mark?
Yeah, I'm in short answer. I'm in favor of it. Again, I think it's part of the solution, and it's a step in the right direction. But it's not a silver bullet. It's not a magic wand. It's not going to turn the tide, so to speak. But yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction.
Kevin?
Courts aren't great places to deal with these issues, but if someone's committing a crime, then geez, we better make sure someone gets arrested and prosecuted. We didn't get to really talk about the Pelletier case because that's a worrisome case for me. Because you see, again, this issue of the competence of the way the government handled a problem. And this girl was just suddenly diagnosed. I mean, I know you're all probably familiar with the case, by these doctors that said what was happening wasn't that she was sick, but it was that the parents were abusing her somehow, and she was ripped from her family and kept. They weren't allowed to go see her in America. All right? Now, these kinds of disagreements among doctors happen all the time. But could you imagine there being a legal ramification to your doctor saying, oh, I don't think you need knee surgery, I think you just need rehab. And what we're going to do is we're going to arrest you so you can have your rehab.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that's not so different from what actually took place.
Right.
And there really wasn't much of a recourse.
Exactly what took
And there really wasn't much accountability where the governor would stand up and say, here's what we're doing and why. And strangely to me, as someone that comes from the healthcare business, why wouldn't you just go and get a third opinion and have that handle the case?
Makes too much sense.
It makes too much sense. Now, that to me is at the root of these things, and I think again, what I come back to always is why is it that what, as you said, what makes sense, right? So many of these things we talk about, we can all talk about as adults and say, yeah, this would make sense if we did it this way, and yet decisions get made in other directions. Sometimes it's because of just the complete incompetence of the people involved. Okay, we're human beings. Let's fire the required people, which requires that we vote them out of office. That's one thing. The second thing would be maybe there's people doing stuff that they're not telling us about. Like this stuff with what's going on with the Olympics right now. Isn't this interesting? This is sort of an Alice in Wonderland thing with the Olympics. They sent in the bid to the U.S. Olympic Committee, and then the governor-elect is saying, you know, after, if we get picked, we're gonna have this really great public discussion about this, which is sort of the verdict first, then trial. Like, what in the world is going on? Well, there's a lot of people, so that's another thing that goes on in our government. The way these things will change is not just by us meeting and complaining about them, and I know that that's a powerful thing to do, so I commend you for doing it, but also by building that framework to elect people who want to be real and talk openly and honestly about these things. Who will do it in front of any audience. You'll find if you follow me around, and I'm not inviting you to follow me around, that'd be kind of creepy, but you would see that if I'm talking in front of an audience of the Worcester Tea Party, or if I'm talking in, you pick whatever the opposite of the Worcester Tea Party is, you're going to hear the same thing from me. Huh?
National Alliance.
Sure. Whatever. Any of these groups. I'm the same person talking this way. We need more people like that in our government and in our politics who are willing to keep it real.
Yeah.
Now you notice what happens in the system when you start to do that too much. They try to exclude you because you're like a, virus or something, right? You're like, don't do that. Don't talk. Don't talk. You know, it's bad. Yeah. God bless. You know what they did, which was really cool about that? I'll this last thing I'll say, I'm sorry. But it was terrible that I was excluded from that debate. And it was terrible what they did to Mark, by the way, too. That was wrong. They should be ashamed of themselves. It should never have happened. It made a mockery of the system. When you're sitting there as a voter and you say, this is how you guys run yourselves? You backroom dealing here? Now? Why? Why? What are you so afraid of? Right? If Mark is not worthy of being on the ballot, what are you afraid of? You know, vote. Just vote. What's the problem? But you know what it did, both in that case and in the one with me with this debate, is that it crystallized for voters the reality of what's really going on. It wasn't just a theory. It was like, wow, I like Mark Fisher. I can't wait to see how this plays out. Nope, we're keeping him off the ballot. Well, how'd that happen? Who did that? You see what I mean? So they did us a favor by mistreating both of us. We're both okay, right?
Yeah.
I was completely wrong. Now look at that. Try to get to one of these debates. I'm telling you, Mark, it will work. He looks good. It's like it's good. But anyway, it was very important because it revealed what was really going on to people, and that is, I would say, one of the most powerful things that happened in the course of this year, 2014, that people will look back on. They'll say, you know something, we saw something that was really ugly that we didn't like. And it happened to people of different sides of the political spectrum. Totally different people did it to them, but they're all part of that same political establishment that must be challenged and must be replaced.
Thank you.
Although the circumstances were slightly different than Mark's, they did the exact exact same thing in the primary to a congressional candidate from Lexington who put in $1.5 million of his own money. And they absolutely just completely stonewall him out because he was making a lot of sense and they didn't want that. Let's move on to the last question. And
Excuse
then
me,
we'll
John.
back up to everybody here.
Excuse me, John. This is why you guys are on my show. This is what I do. And I thank both of you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
We've seen the militarization of our police forces nationwide. By the way, you do understand that under our president governor, we've had martial law twice in this state since he's been elected. You realize that? Watertown and the big snowstorm 2 years ago. Okay, just thought I wanted to make you know. All right. Now there's a relatively new thing coming out, and there seems to be a lot of confusion about it, but you need to know more about it. And if you don't, just don't give an opinion. Research this, because the people that are behind trying to expose this is a very serious situation. And it's NDAA. Okay? And it's section 1021 and 1022. It's a very real thing in all the communities. The media is like clueless about it because they really don't care. They don't believe it. They say it's a bunch of wackos that are just against the military. It isn't against the military. It just happens to be under the military where this came from. White House signed, the current guy in the White House signed it into law this past April. And nobody really talked about that. So, without habeas corpus being held indefinitely, it started out as being if you were a terrorist. Now it's virtually, you could jaywalk in theory. You could sell drugs in theory. You could be arrested for drunken driving. You could say something against the government. Who knows what you could get arrested for today under the present powers. But to be held indefinitely, what do you guys think? Mark?
Again, that's a no-brainer. I mean, we have a constitution, and we should abide by it.
Right.
As far as the increase in the police force and military-style tactics and things, you know, I think that a lot of this has come about since 9/11 with the influx of money that's available to states and local communities. And again, part of government is if you got the money, we need to spend it or else it's going to go back. I think that there was enough military-style power in the National Guard in states, and in those rare instances where it's needed, the head of the state can call it the force. But it seems like now every local community has its own bomb trailer and SWAT team and all. This is unnecessary. It's not needed. However, because the money was available, let's spend it or we're going to lose it. This type of big government attitude that seems like every city in town is taking advantage of, not just in Massachusetts but across the country, and it doesn't bode well for everyday, ordinary citizens. Again, the National Guard exists for particular circumstances in emergencies, and I think they are being, I'll say usurped, but it's redundant, over-redundant by having it, the same type of force in cities and towns throughout Massachusetts and the rest of the country.
Evan?
Land of the free, home of the brave. That's what I say. And brave means brave. It means not afraid, right? So I think the atrocity of what those guys did at the marathon was exactly what I said it was. It was an atrocity. It was awful. Where I live, we were kept under, what do they call it? Shelter in place. So you never heard these words before, but all of a sudden, shelter in place. What's that? Sounds like something you're supposed to do when there's like a nuclear bomb. But it's just a couple, excuse my language, dipshits who are being chased by the police. And so I gotta hide my house because of that? Because the government thinks that's what's best for me? Because the government thinks that we're so timid and scared that we can't go outside? You know what's crazy is that they found that kid inside of the boat when they said you could go outside. Because the guy went outside to smoke a cigarette. And it's like, shit, someone cut open my boat. And there's blood all over the place. That looks suspicious. I know I'm not trained in this. But that looks weird. All right, what, you know, and the fact that during the snowstorm it was the same thing. It was one of these things where did this happen? How did this take place that we suddenly are forced to cower inside of our homes? I think that we need a government that will treat us like we are the brave American citizens.